Hello, I'm Martin Haese, Chief Executive of Business SA, the Chamber of Commerce and Industry. This week, State Treasurer Rob Lucas handed down the 2020-21 state budget. Long awaited and critically important. Business SA has been a very strong advocate in recent months to inform that budget on your behalf, our members. I'm here today with our Director of Policy and Advocacy, Andrew McKenna. Andrew, welcome.
Yeah, thanks, Martin.
I'd like to ask, first of all, is that payroll tax has been a very important matter which Business SA has been a long-term advocate on payroll tax reform for South Australian business, for Business SA members. Did the Treasurer answer our prayers?
Well, Martin, there has been quite significant payroll tax relief in this budget, and it's across 3 separate tranches. So what we've seen is that the existing payroll tax waiver for businesses with a payroll of $4 million or less, which had only just been extended to December, has now been extended to June 2021.
That's a good outcome.
That's a material outcome. So for a business who might have 20 odd employees, on the average wage, they're probably paying about 50 grand per annum in payroll tax. So that gives you some sort of a quantum of what that means for those types of businesses. What we've seen in addition to that is for all businesses, if they take on an apprentice or a trainee, they get a payroll tax exemption for 12 months on those wages. Now again, that's a significant help in addition to the recent federal government incentives. And it is something that Business SA has been advocating for since it was last dropped in 2012, 2013. So we've waited for a while for that payroll tax exemption to be reintroduced for apprentices and trainees, but it's finally come. The third tranche of the payroll tax relief is for those businesses with a payroll above $4 million. Now, if they were impacted by COVID, to date, they've been able to get a deferral on payroll tax. What the government is now saying is if they're still impacted by COVID, they're still on JobKeeper, as at the 4th of January, they'll actually get a waiver of payroll tax between January and June 2021. So again, that's a significant step change in payroll tax support for those businesses impacted by COVID eligible for JobKeeper.
Well, Business SA commends State Treasurer Rob Lucas and also, of course, Minister David Pisoni on both those outcomes. That's good for business.
Yeah, that's excellent for business. The entire payroll tax package is now worth $233 million from the beginning of the COVID pandemic period through till the end of June 2021.
Andrew, Business SA is the Chamber of Commerce and the peak body for business across South Australia. I know that we have been advocating very consistently for the cash grants to support businesses which are materially impacted by COVID-19. Has the Treasurer delivered?
Well, Martin, the Treasurer has delivered quite a substantial cash grant program, but it is for those businesses who have sub $1.5 million payroll, so essentially those businesses that aren't otherwise eligible for payroll tax relief. Now, what this new program means is that a small business, if they're still on JobKeeper as at today, then they can apply for a $10,000 cash grant. If they're a sole trader or a partnership or a trust, so a non-employing small business, they can apply for a $3,000 grant. Now, this is a new grant. The first tranche of those grants weren't available to non-employing businesses, and Business SA had advocated quite strongly to the state government to include the non-employing businesses because we know how important they are to the state's economy, and we also know the impact of COVID-19 on those businesses. The only catch with that grant is that those non-employing businesses have to occupy a commercial premises. So yes, quite a substantial boost for those heavily impacted businesses, but if those businesses have a payroll above $1.5 million, they only get the additional payroll tax support that all businesses remaining on JobKeeper get.
The centrepiece, of course, of the state budget is the $16.7 billion infrastructure spend by the state government in partnership with the federal government. Of course, this also features the continuation and completion of the North-South Corridor by 2030. Andrew, is this good for business?
Well, the North-South Corridor is a great announcement for business. We've been looking for this announcement for many years. It was originally supposed to be a project that was to be completed by 2023. We're now looking at a 2030 completion date, but we still have a plan now which we haven't had for quite some years, and that's really important to give businesses certainty. It's an $8.9 billion project. It's a very expensive project, but we can look ahead and we know where the state government's going with this major piece of transport infrastructure.
What does it mean for freight transport? Businesses need to get their goods from A to B in a timely manner. What does that mean for kind of the bottom line of a business?
Well, Martin, this is really critical, particularly for our exporters who are otherwise facing challenges in global markets, to have certainty about improvements in their freight supply chain. I mean, to have a continuous freight path from the south and the north through to Port Adelaide, through the Adelaide Airport. It's a really important aspect of ensuring that South Australian exporters can be competitive in global markets.
What about reducing commute times, opening up kind of new corridors for new homes and construction industry? Business SA has a lot of members working in construction supply chains. What are your thoughts there?
Well, it's not just about me, Martin, but I reckon I'll save about 10 minutes on my commute to work. Unfortunately, you, Martin, you walk to work, so there won't be any savings. But I think when we look at South Australia more broadly, this is going to improve the livability of Adelaide.
Andrew, tell us about the D word, debt. The Treasurer has described it as being eye-watering in terms of the level of state debt. What are your thoughts?
Well, Martin, there's no avoiding it. We needed to go into this level of deficit and debt. So the government had to act and do what it needed to do to get South Australia through the pandemic and to reposition the economy for longer term growth. In terms of relativity, with interest rates falling, what we have seen, if we go back to the mid-year budget review, interest payments are actually at equivalent levels in 3 years, even though we've added an extra $11 billion to net debt for the general government sector, which peaks at $24 billion in 23-24.
Andrew, also the Treasurer shared during the budget lockup that the state would be returning to a surplus in 23-24. Is it achievable?
Well, I think it is, Martin. There's a significant amount of stimulus spending in this budget. We've got approximately $4 billion to be spent over the next 2 years. So I think a surplus is achievable, but this will come after about $6 billion of cumulative deficits between last financial year and 3 years' time. So we are paying quite a significant price in the meantime. However, it is in the broader context of very low interest rates.
Andrew, we believe that overall this is a strong budget which really backs business for this financial year and beyond. But of course there are some sectors which will remain materially impacted, like the event sector, some parts of the accommodation sector, and of course those businesses reliant on international guests. What's your thinking about how they can be assisted?
Yeah, well look, Martin, that is probably the area where, whilst there was a considerable amount of broader tax and grant support in the budget, it wasn't so much targeted at those businesses that are most acutely impacted by the COVID-19 restrictions. So they will continue to face challenges as we move into 2021. What we also haven't seen on the event side is a significant new event to replace the Adelaide 500 at this stage. And the amount of money for business event funding is also similar as it was for the last financial year. So it has been continued at around $5 million per annum for the event bid fund, but we haven't seen any new funding for businesses events, including smaller business events that are more suitable to the regions.
Andrew, any closing comments on infrastructure? You spoke about the North-South corridor, but of course there's infrastructure projects around the state, including of course the regions, which are very important to our economy.
Well, that's right, Martin. And one of the key projects for the regions is additional money to seal the Strzelecki track. Now, it hasn't been funded in its entirety. There's still about $45 million of a now $180 million project, but that is quite important for the oil and gas, livestock and broader tourism sectors. But what we haven't seen in this budget is a start on some of the major highway duplications that we've been advocating for, both the Dukes Highway and the Augusta Highway duplications. Unfortunately, nothing of that magnitude, and they are long-term projects that we are going to have to make a start on at some point.
As the peak independent body for business representing all industries right around South Australia, Business SA has been a strong advocate for, on behalf of you, our members, to ensure that you got the best outcomes out of this year's state budget. For further information, please do visit the Business SA website, where you'll have a full, comprehensive and detailed analysis about every aspect of this year's state budget. Thanks so much.